The camera cuts through the morning mist of the Russian forest. A lone figure emerges from the shadows, an elderly Dogo Argentino, his white coat weathered by years of waiting. His eyes, once bright with puppy innocence, now carry the weight of 5 winters. Behind him stands an old wooden gate, paint peeling, metal rusted, but the dog's vigil remains unbroken. The sound of approaching footsteps echoes through the silence. A man in military uniform appears, his hands trembling as he reaches toward the gate. The dog lifts his massive head, and for a moment, time stands still. 5 years of unwavering faith crystallize in a single glance. This is the moment that will shock the world. This is the reunion that will bring a nation to tears. This is the story of Toro, the Dogo Argentino, who waited for his master for 1,225 days, and in doing so became a legend that would change everything. But to understand how a simple forest dog became a global symbol of loyalty, how his story sparked international outrage and government intervention, how one animal's devotion saved an entire forest from destruction, we must go back to where it all began. Back to a frozen morning in 2018 when destiny disguised itself as tragedy. Before we dive into this incredible journey, I need you to do something. Look at the comments below and tell me, what country are you watching from? Because this story of loyalty transcends borders, and I want to know where Toro's legend has reached. And if you're ready to witness one of the most powerful stories of devotion ever captured, hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will change how you think about loyalty forever. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Deep in the Siberian wilderness, where ancient pines stretch toward endless skies and the silence is broken only by wind and wildlife, lived a man whose name would become forever intertwined with legend. Miguel was not your typical forest ranger. At 34, he had chosen solitude over society, finding peace in the rhythm of nature that most people never learn to hear. Miguel's cabin sat at the edge of the Taiga Reserve, a sanctuary of protected wilderness that he had guarded for 8 years. Every morning, he would walk the same paths his father had walked, checking for poachers, monitoring wildlife, and maintaining the delicate balance between human needs and nature's demands. His calloused hands told stories of countless repairs. His weathered face bore witness to harsh winters, and his quiet eyes held the wisdom of someone who understood that in nature, loyalty and trust are matters of survival. But Miguel carried a loneliness that even the vast forest couldn't fill. His father had died when Miguel was 26, leaving him not just a job, but a calling. His mother had passed 2 years later, unable to bear the isolation that her son had embraced. Miguel had no siblings, no close friends, no romantic attachments. He had chosen this life, but choice doesn't always eliminate the ache of solitude. He filled his days with purpose, documenting wildlife, reporting illegal activities, and maintaining the network of trails that connected his territory. His evenings were spent reading by lamplight, writing detailed reports, and listening to the symphony of the forest. It was a simple life, an honest life, but it was incomplete. Miguel didn't know that on one frozen morning in March 2018, his solitary existence was about to change forever. He didn't know that his life was about to intersect with another soul whose capacity for loyalty would humble the entire world. He had no idea that he was about to become part of a story that would be told for generations. As he prepared for his morning rounds that day, checking his equipment and plotting his route, Miguel was simply doing what he had always done, serving as guardian to a wilderness that couldn't protect itself. He never imagined that by the end of that day he would no longer be guarding the forest alone. The morning of March 15th, 2018 began like any other for Miguel. The thermometer outside his cabin read -18 degrees Celsius, typical for late winter in the Siberian wilderness. He strapped on his snowshoes, shouldered his pack, and began his routine patrol along the eastern boundary of the reserve. For 3 hours, he found nothing unusual. A few deer tracks, evidence of a lynx hunting party, the normal signs of a forest preparing for spring. But as he approached a clearing known locally as Hunter's Rest, a sound stopped him cold. It wasn't the cry of any wild animal he recognized. It was something else entirely, weak, desperate, and heartbreaking. Following the sound through a stand of birch trees, Miguel discovered something that would haunt him forever if he chose to ignore it. Caught in a brutal leg-hold trap designed to catch wolves, but indiscriminate in its cruelty, was a Dogo Argentino puppy no more than 3 months old. But this wasn't just any puppy. This was a creature whose breeding spoke of nobility and strength, a pure white coat that gleamed even in the harsh morning light, a muscular build that promised power when fully grown, and eyes that held an intelligence far beyond his months. The trap had clamped down on his left rear leg, and blood had frozen in dark patches on the snow around him. What struck Miguel most profoundly wasn't the puppy's pain. It was his response to it. Most animals caught in such traps fight with desperate fury, exhausting themselves in panic. But this puppy sat quietly, his dark eyes fixed on Miguel's face with an expression that seemed to say, "I trust you to help me." There was no snarling, no snapping, no signs of aggression despite his agony, only quiet dignity and hope. Miguel's hands shook as he approached, not from cold, but from emotion. In 8 years as a forest ranger, he had found dozens of animals. In similar traps, some dead, others so damaged they had to be put down. The traps were illegal in the protected reserve, set by poachers who cared nothing for conservation laws or animal welfare. Usually Miguel could maintain professional distance, but something about this puppy's calm trust shattered his defenses completely. The trap mechanism was old but well maintained, the kind used by professional hunters who knew their craft. As Miguel worked to release the jaws, the puppy watched him with steady attention, occasionally licking Miguel's gloved hands as if to encourage him. When the trap finally opened and the puppy was free, he didn't run. Instead, he pressed against Miguel's legs, trembling not just from cold and shock, but from what seemed like gratitude. Miguel examined the injured leg carefully. The trap had caused significant damage, but the bone appeared intact. The puppy would need veterinary care immediately, but Miguel faced a terrible reality. The nearest veterinarian was over 300 kilometers away, and the roads were impassable due to early spring flooding. As he cradled the injured animal against his chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat through his jacket, Miguel made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't save every animal that suffered in his forest, but he could save this one. This puppy, who had trusted him completely from their first moment together, deserved a chance at life. Miguel's cabin had never housed anything larger than the occasional injured squirrel or rabbit. Suddenly, it became a makeshift animal hospital as he worked to save the Dogo Argentino puppy he had begun calling Toro, Spanish for bull, reflecting the pup's incredible strength and determination. Without access to professional veterinary care, Miguel relied on his field medic training from his military service years earlier. He cleaned the wounds with vodka, applied makeshift bandages from torn sheets, and created a splint using birch bark and rope. The puppy endured every painful procedure without complaint, his dark eyes never leaving Miguel's face. For the first 3 days, Miguel wasn't sure Toro would survive. The puppy barely ate, slept fitfully, and showed signs of infection despite Miguel's careful attention. But on the 4th morning, something changed. Toro lifted his head when Miguel approached, managed a weak tail wag, and ate a full bowl of warm broth. The recovery was slow but remarkable. Within 2 weeks, Toro was putting weight on his injured leg. Within a month, he was following Miguel around the cabin with only a slight limp. But the physical healing was only part of the transformation taking place. As Toro grew stronger, Miguel realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just an intelligent dog. This was an animal with an almost supernatural ability to understand human needs and emotions. Toro seemed to anticipate Miguel's moods, offering comfort during lonely evenings and excitement during productive days. When Miguel was frustrated with paperwork, Toro would bring him items, a stick, a rope, anything to break the tension. When Miguel was sad, thinking about his deceased parents, Toro would rest his head on Miguel's lap and remain completely still until the moment passed. By summer 2018, Toro had grown into a magnificent young dog weighing nearly 40 kilograms. His injured leg had healed completely, leaving only a small scar hidden beneath his pristine white coat. But more importantly, he had developed an almost telepathic connection with Miguel. Their morning patrols became adventures in partnership. Toro learned to detect illegal snares before Miguel could spot them, using his exceptional nose to find the scent of metal and human intrusion in the natural environment. He could identify different types of animal tracks, alerting Miguel to unusual wildlife activity with specific behaviors. A low whine for predators, excited tail wagging for deer families, and absolute stillness for signs of human poachers. Miguel had never trained a dog before, but Toro made it seem effortless. The dog learned commands in both Russian and Spanish, responded to hand signals from incredible distances, and developed an understanding of forest work that amazed even veteran rangers who occasionally visited the territory. But it was Toro's protective instincts that truly set him apart. One afternoon in late July, as Miguel was documenting a beaver dam, Toro suddenly positioned himself between his master and a stand of dense undergrowth. His hackles rose, his body tensed, and he issued a low, warning growl. Miguel trusted the dog's instincts completely and slowly backed away. Moments later, a massive brown bear emerged from exactly where Miguel had been standing. The confrontation lasted only seconds, but it established a new dynamic in their relationship. Toro wasn't just a companion. He was a guardian angel with 4 legs and supernatural awareness. Miguel realized that in saving the dog's life, he had acquired a protector whose loyalty and vigilance would exceed anything he could have imagined. The winter of 2018-2019 tested their bond like nothing before. Temperatures dropped to minus 35 degrees Celsius. Snow buried the forest under 3 meters of white silence, and isolation became absolute. For 4 months, Miguel and Toro saw no other humans, heard no engines, experienced no contact with the outside world except for weekly radio check-ins with headquarters. During those long, dark months, their relationship deepened beyond the ordinary bonds between human and animal. Toro developed routines that supported Miguel's mental health, bringing firewood without being asked, alerting him to weather changes hours before they arrived, and providing the kind of constant, non-judgmental companionship that prevented the dangerous psychological effects of extreme isolation. Miguel began talking to Toro as he would to a human friend, sharing his thoughts about conservation work, his memories of his parents, his dreams for the future of the forest. Toro listened with remarkable attention, his intelligent eyes tracking Miguel's expressions, his body language responding to emotional nuances in ways that seemed almost human. By spring 2019, Miguel realized that his life had fundamentally changed. He was no longer a lonely forest ranger doing necessary work in isolation. He was part of a team, a partnership that made both him and his work more effective, more meaningful, and more joyful than he had ever imagined possible. As their second year together progressed, stories about Miguel and his extraordinary white dog began spreading through the regional network of forest workers, hunters, and local residents. Toro's size, intelligence, and protective instincts were becoming legendary. There was the incident with the illegal logging crew who tried to cut down protected pines near the river boundary. Miguel arrived to find their chainsaws mysteriously disabled, their truck tires deflated, and their equipment scattered, but no sign of violence toward the men themselves. Toro sat calmly nearby, his intelligent eyes watching the frustrated loggers pack their damaged gear and leave. There was the lost hiking party from Moscow who had wandered off marked trails during a late-season snowstorm. Search and rescue teams had been looking for them for 2 days when Toro suddenly alerted Miguel to something unusual. Following the dog's lead, Miguel found all 4 hikers hypothermic but alive in a natural cave formation, huddled together for warmth. They later reported that a large white dog had appeared from nowhere, led them to the cave, and stayed with them through the night before disappearing again at dawn. Local indigenous communities began referring to Toro as White Guardian in their native language, believing he was a forest spirit made manifest to protect the sacred lands. Hunters reported sightings of the mysterious white dog patrolling areas where illegal traps had been previously found, as if he was conducting his own conservation work. Everything changed on a cold morning in January 2021. Miguel was reviewing wildlife population reports when his radio crackled with an official communication from the Ministry of Defense. The message was brief and non-negotiable. Miguel Petrov was being recalled to active military duty. He had 48 hours to report to a training facility near Moscow, where he would undergo preparation for deployment to a classified location. For an indefinite period, the call was not entirely unexpected. Miguel's specialized skills in wilderness survival, his military background, and his security clearance made him valuable for certain types of operations. But the timing couldn't have been worse. He was in the middle of the most important conservation project of his career, documenting evidence of illegal mining operations that were threatening the watershed that supported the entire regional ecosystem. More importantly, he now had Toro to consider. The bond between them had grown so strong that Miguel couldn't imagine life without his 4-legged partner. But military deployment meant leaving everything behind, and there would be no possibility of taking a dog, no matter how extraordinary. Miguel spent that entire night staring at Toro, who seemed to sense that something momentous was happening. The dog stayed close, occasionally placing his massive head on Miguel's lap, his dark eyes reflecting the lamplight with an expression that seemed to understand that their perfect partnership was about to be tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. With 36 hours remaining before he had to report for duty, Miguel began the heartbreaking task of finding a new home for Toro. He called every contact in his professional network, every friend of his parents, every animal rescue organization within 500 kilometers. The responses were all variations of the same theme. Toro was too large, too powerful, too specialized for ordinary pet ownership. Most people were intimidated by the Dogo Argentino breed, known for strength and protective instincts that required experienced handling. Others were put off by Toro's size. He now weighed 60 kilograms and continued growing. Several potential homes fell through when people met Toro in person and realized they were dealing with an animal whose intelligence and intensity exceeded their expectations. The local veterinarian, Dr. Volkova, agreed to board Toro temporarily, but warned Miguel that long-term boarding would be psychologically devastating for a dog accustomed to freedom and purpose. She had seen working dogs deteriorate rapidly when removed from their natural environments and meaningful activities. As his final day approached, Miguel faced the terrible reality that he had no choice but to leave Toro with the Forest Service, hoping that his replacement would appreciate the dog's extraordinary abilities and continue their partnership. But he knew that was unlikely. Most forest rangers were transferred frequently, and few had the patience or understanding necessary to work with an animal as complex and devoted as Toro. On Miguel's last morning at the cabin, he and Toro took their final patrol together. They walked every trail they had traveled as partners, visited every special place they had discovered, and shared a silent communion that transcended words. Toro seemed to understand that this wasn't an ordinary day. His usual playfulness was subdued, replaced by a solemn attention to Miguel's every movement and expression. When they returned to the cabin, Miguel's replacement had already arrived. Carlos Mendez was a capable forest ranger, but he made it immediately clear that he had no interest in working with Toro. He viewed the dog as a complication, an unnecessary responsibility that would interfere with his own methods and routines. Miguel felt his heart breaking as he realized that the partnership he and Toro had built was about to be destroyed, not by necessity, but by indifference. Carlos saw Toro as just another animal, failing to recognize the intelligence, loyalty, and purpose that made him extraordinary. As the government vehicle arrived to take Miguel away, he walked with Toro to the wooden gate that marked the entrance to their territory. This gate had become symbolic of their life together. They passed through it every morning to begin their patrols and returned through it every evening to their shared home. Kneeling beside Toro, Miguel took the dog's massive head in his hands and looked into those intelligent dark eyes for what he believed might be the last time. In Spanish, the language he had used for their most intimate communications, he made a promise that would become the foundation of legend. Toro, my brother, I have to leave you now. But I will come back. I promise you, I will come back. Wait for me here at this gate. No matter how long it takes, I will return for you. Wait for me. Toro's response was a behavior Miguel had never seen before. The dog sat perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Miguel's face, and then pressed his forehead against Miguel's chest in what could only be described as an embrace. It was as if he was saying, I understand, and I will wait. As Miguel climbed into the vehicle, Toro positioned himself beside the gate and remained completely motionless, watching the car disappear into the forest. Carlos called for him to come, but Toro didn't respond. He had received his orders from the only authority he recognized, and those orders were clear. Wait at the gate until Miguel returned. What Carlos, Miguel, and the entire world was about to discover was that Toro's interpretation of wait would redefine the meaning of loyalty for generations to come. From the moment Miguel's vehicle disappeared beyond the tree line, Toro began a vigil that would shock the world. Every morning at precisely 6 a.m., he would position himself beside the wooden gate, facing the direction Miguel had gone. Every evening at sunset, he would allow himself to retreat to the shelter Carlos had grudgingly provided, but only after scanning the horizon one final time. The first month, Carlos assumed the behavior would fade. Dogs forget, he reasoned, especially when faced with new routines and different handlers. But Toro's devotion proved immune to logic, routine, or the passage of time. He performed his forest duties with Carlos efficiently but without enthusiasm, saving all his emotional energy for the daily vigil at the gate. By the 6th month, word of Toro's behavior had spread throughout the regional Forest Service network. Veteran rangers who had worked with dozens of dogs over their careers admitted they had never witnessed such unwavering loyalty. Visiting officials would make detours to observe the white dog who waited by the gate with religious dedication. The first winter alone tested Toro's resolve like nothing before. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. Snow buried the gate under meters of white, and storms raged for days at a time. But every morning, workers arriving at the station would find fresh paw prints in the snow leading to the gate, and the outline of a large dog who had spent the night in vigil despite conditions that challenged survival itself. Dr. Volkova, the veterinarian who had offered to board Toro, made monthly visits to check on his health and psychological state. What she found defied veterinary science and canine behavioral understanding. Despite the emotional stress of separation, Toro remained in perfect physical condition. His weight was stable, his coat remained lustrous, and his alertness never dimmed. It was as if his unshakable faith in Miguel's return provided a source of strength that sustained him beyond normal biological limitations. In early 2023, a visiting photographer named Ivan Petrov, no relation to Miguel, was documenting wildlife in the reserve when he captured an image that would change everything. His photograph showed Toro at his post beside the gate, his white coat stark against the dark wood, his posture radiating dignity and unwavering purpose. Ivan shared the image on social media with a simple caption: "This dog has been waiting at this gate for his master for over 4 years. Local rangers say he never misses a day." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours, the photograph had been shared over 100,000 times, with comments in dozens of languages from people moved by the obvious devotion captured in a single frame. News outlets picked up the story, and soon journalists were making pilgrimages to the remote forest station to document Toro's vigil. Each visitor came expecting to find a sad, deteriorating animal clinging to false hope. Instead, they encountered a magnificent dog in his prime, whose eyes held not desperation but calm certainty. International animal welfare organizations began monitoring Toro's situation, concerned about the psychological effects of prolonged separation anxiety. But veterinary experts who examined him were forced to conclude that this wasn't anxiety at all. It was conscious choice. Toro wasn't suffering from inability to accept Miguel's absence. He was actively choosing to maintain faith in his return. As Toro's story gained global attention, it also attracted unwanted scrutiny from bureaucratic authorities who viewed the situation through different lenses. Animal control officials raised questions about a large, uncontrolled dog living in a government facility. Safety inspectors worried about liability issues if Toro injured a visitor. Budget analysts questioned the resources being dedicated to maintaining an animal who served no official function. The situation came to a head when Carlos Mendez, frustrated by the constant media attention and pressure to accommodate Toro's schedule, filed a formal complaint with regional administration. In his report, he described Toro as an uncontrolled animal presenting potential safety hazards to personnel and visitors, consuming resources without contributing to Forest Service objectives, and creating disruptions that interfere with normal operations. Carlos's report triggered a bureaucratic review process that examined Toro's status from legal, financial, and safety perspectives. The conclusion was swift and merciless. Toro had no official standing as a Forest Service animal, no documentation of rabies vaccination or health certificates, and no designated caretaker accepting responsibility for his actions. On March 15, 2024, exactly 6 years after Miguel had first found Toro in the trap, an official order was issued by the Regional Forest Service Administration. The unregistered K9 currently residing at Station 47 will be removed from the premises and humanely euthanized within 72 hours, in accordance with regulations governing uncontrolled animals in government facilities. The death sentence had been signed. Toro, whose only crime was loving too deeply and faithfully, would pay for his devotion with his life. Miguel learned about the euthanization order through a frantic phone call from Dr. Volkova, who had been monitoring the situation through her contacts in the Forest Service. He was 4,000 kilometers away at a remote military installation, completing the final phase of his deployment. His service contract wouldn't expire for another 3 months, but some promises transcend military orders, legal contracts, and geographical impossibilities. Miguel had sworn to return to Toro, and that promise was about to be tested in the most dramatic way possible. Using every favor owed to him, every connection made during his military service, and his entire savings account, Miguel began a desperate race against time. He requested emergency leave, was denied, and then made a decision that could have resulted in court-martial. He went absent without leave, betting everything on his ability to save Toro, and sought out the legal consequences later. The journey from his military base to the forest station normally required 2 days of travel by train and bus. Miguel completed it in 18 hours, hitchhiking rides from military convoys, chartering a helicopter with a pilot who was moved by the story, and finally borrowing a snowmobile to cover the final 100 kilometers through territory that was impassable by conventional vehicle. As Miguel raced across the frozen wilderness, news of the euthanization order had leaked to social media. The international community that had been following Toro's story exploded with outrage. Petitions demanding clemency garnered hundreds of thousands of signatures within hours. News crews chartered flights to reach the remote location before the 72-hour deadline expired. But bureaucracy moves slowly, even in the face of public pressure. The order stood, and the veterinary team tasked with its implementation was already en route to the station. Miguel arrived at the forest station at 4:30 a.m. on March 18th, just 14 hours before the scheduled euthanization. The scene that greeted him defied all description and explanation. Despite nearly 6 years of separation, despite weather that had challenged survival itself, despite bureaucratic indifference and administrative hostility, Toro was exactly where Miguel had left him, beside the gate, facing the direction his master had gone, waiting with the patience of eternity itself. The reunion was witnessed by early arriving news crews who had anticipated documenting a tragedy, but instead captured something far more powerful. Miguel's approach was slow and careful. 6 years is a lifetime in dog years, and he wasn't certain Toro would remember him. But as Miguel came within 50 meters of the gate, Toro's head lifted with sudden alertness. Their eyes met across the snowy clearing, and time seemed suspended. Then, with a dignity that had never wavered throughout his vigil, Toro rose to his feet and walked toward the man who had never broken his promise. The reunion lasted only moments, a careful recognition, then an explosion of joy that brought tears to the eyes of every witness. Miguel dropped to his knees as 60 kilograms of devoted dog knocked him backward into the snow, both of them overwhelmed by emotions that had been building for 2,192 days. But their joy was shadowed by approaching headlights. The veterinary team tasked with implementing the euthanization order was arriving right on schedule, unaware that the world was now watching. As the official vehicles approached the gate where Miguel and Toro were completing their reunion, Miguel made a decision that turned a personal crisis into a global moment of truth. Using his military-issued satellite communication device, he initiated a live video broadcast on social media platforms, speaking directly to the world about what was happening. "My name is Miguel Petrov," he said, his arms around Toro as official vehicles approached. "This is my dog, Toro, who waited for me at this gate for almost 6 years. In 10 minutes, these officials planned to kill him because bureaucrats decided his love was inconvenient. I want the world to watch what happens when loyalty meets indifference." The broadcast went viral instantly. Within minutes, viewers in over 50 countries were watching the confrontation unfold in real time. Social media platforms crashed under the traffic as millions of people shared the stream, adding their voices to a growing international outcry. The veterinary team, expecting to perform a routine euthanization in privacy, suddenly found themselves facing news cameras, live streaming devices, and a global audience that was not going to allow Toro's story to end in tragedy. The lead veterinarian, Dr. Komarov, recognized that the situation had transcended his simple administrative task and placed a call to his supervisors for guidance. As the standoff continued, politicians, celebrities, animal welfare organizations, and ordinary people from around the world flooded government communication systems with demands for clemency. The Russian embassy in dozens of countries reported unprecedented volumes of calls and emails from citizens demanding intervention. The international pressure reached the highest levels of government within hours. What had begun as a routine animal control action had become a diplomatic crisis, a public relations nightmare, and a test of whether humanity's better angels could overcome bureaucratic indifference. At 11:47 a.m., just 33 minutes before the scheduled euthanization, Dr. Komarov's satellite phone rang with a call from the Federal Environmental Protection Agency in Moscow. The caller was Deputy Minister Elena Volkov herself, speaking on direct orders from the President's office. "Dr. Komarov," she said, "you are to immediately cease all actions regarding the animal in question. A full review of this situation is being initiated at the federal level, and no action will be taken pending that review. Is this understood? The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Miguel, who had been prepared to physically prevent the euthanization regardless of legal consequences, collapsed beside Toro in tears. The global audience watching the live stream erupted in celebration across social media platforms. News outlets that had been preparing to report on bureaucratic cruelty instead found themselves documenting the power of public opinion in the digital age. But the reprieve was only the beginning. The international attention focused on Toro's story had revealed larger issues about wildlife protection, forest conservation, and the treatment of animals in government facilities. What started as one dog's death sentence had become a catalyst for systematic change. The federal review ordered by the President's office uncovered a complex web of problems at the forestation that went far beyond Toro's case. Carlos Mendez's management had been marked by numerous violations of environmental protection protocols, conflicts with local indigenous communities, and evidence of potential corruption in monitoring illegal logging operations. More importantly, the investigation revealed that Miguel's original conservation work, the documentation of illegal mining operations that had been interrupted by his military deployment, had been systematically suppressed. Carlos had received payment from mining interests to delay reporting environmental violations, allowing extensive damage to watersheds that supplied water to several regional communities. Toro's story had inadvertently exposed a scandal that threatened the entire regional ecosystem. The dog's loyalty hadn't just saved his own life, it had revealed corruption that was destroying the forest Miguel had dedicated his career to protecting. On May 15, 2024, in an unprecedented ceremony held at the forestation, Toro was officially designated as Guardian of the Tiger Reserve by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. The designation came with legal protections that ensured his lifetime care, recognition of his conservation work, and official status that prevented future bureaucratic threats to his welfare. Miguel was not only reinstated as head ranger, but promoted to regional conservation coordinator, with expanded authority over multiple forest reserves and a mandate to implement the conservation protocols he had been developing before his military deployment. His military service record was cleared, and he received commendations for his specialized training that had enhanced his conservation work. The ceremony was attended by officials from multiple government agencies, international wildlife organizations, and media representatives from around the world. But the most meaningful moment came when Dr. Volkova, the veterinarian who had monitored Toro throughout his vigil, presented him with a custom collar bearing an inscription in both Russian and Spanish. Toro, Guardian of the Tiger, Loyalty. Beyond measure. The global attention brought by Toro's story resulted in substantial improvements to the forest station and the entire regional conservation program. International wildlife organizations provided funding for modern equipment, expanded facilities, and educational programs that would train the next generation of conservation professionals. The wooden gate where Toro had maintained his vigil was preserved as a monument to loyalty and faith. A plaque beside it tells his story in 5 languages, and visitors from around the world make pilgrimages to photograph the site where unwavering devotion captured global imagination. The station itself was expanded into an international research facility focusing on human-animal partnerships in conservation work. Toro became the centerpiece of studies examining canine intelligence, loyalty, and the psychological factors that enable some animals to maintain hope and purpose over extended periods. Toro's story sparked changes that extended far beyond his immediate circumstances. Animal welfare legislation was strengthened to prevent similar bureaucratic threats to animals in government facilities. Forest service protocols were revised to acknowledge the valuable contributions working animals make to conservation efforts. Carlos, Mendez was transferred to a desk job in Moscow after the investigation revealed his negligence and possible corruption. His replacement, Maria Santos, had specifically requested the assignment because she wanted to work with Toro and learn from the partnership he and Miguel had developed. The illegal mining operations Miguel had been investigating were shut down, following the renewed scrutiny brought by international attention to the case. Environmental restoration projects funded by international donors began repairing the damage that had been hidden through bureaucratic corruption. Universities around the world began studying Toro's case as an example of extraordinary animal cognition and emotional capacity. Researchers in animal psychology, veterinary science, and human-animal bond studies found his behavior challenged existing theories about canine memory, emotional processing, and decision-making capacity. Dr. Sarah Chen, a renowned animal behaviorist from Cambridge University, spent 6 months at the station conducting detailed observations of Toro's behavior and cognitive abilities. Her resulting paper, Temporal Loyalty in Canis Lupus Familiaris, a case study in extended separation response, became one of the most cited works in contemporary animal psychology. The research revealed that Toro's waiting behavior was not passive resignation but active choice-making, involving complex cognitive processes, including temporal awareness, memory consolidation, and what appeared to be abstract reasoning about future possibilities. His case became textbook material for veterinary schools worldwide. Toro's story transcended individual fame to become a symbol of values that resonate across cultures and borders. He received honorary designations from animal welfare organizations in over 30 countries. His image became a symbol for loyalty, perseverance, and the power of love to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Children's books about Toro were published in dozens of languages, teaching young readers about commitment, faith, and the special bonds possible between humans and animals. Documentary filmmakers produced award-winning films about his story. Artists created sculptures, paintings, and musical compositions inspired by his example. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the indigenous communities who had always called him White Guardian. Elder Maria Crowfeather presented Toro with a traditional blessing ceremony, declaring him a spirit bridge between human and animal worlds, a designation that had never been given to a non-indigenous animal in the community's 1,000-year history. The ceremony was conducted in the ancient language of her people, with words that recognized Toro not just as a loyal dog, but as a teacher whose example demonstrated truths that human society sometimes forgets. According to tribal tradition, spirit bridges appear during times when the world needs to remember important lessons about love, commitment, and the connections that transcend species boundaries. Today, as I finish telling you Toro's story, he and Miguel continue their work together in the Tiger Reserve. Toro is now 10 years old, elderly for a dog his size, but his eyes still hold the same intelligence and devotion that sustained him through 2,192 days of waiting. Miguel, now 42, has become one of the world's leading experts in human-animal partnerships in conservation work. But their story is about more than one man and one dog. It's about the power of promises kept, the strength that comes from unwavering faith in the truth that love, real love, doesn't calculate costs or measure time. Toro didn't wait because he was trained to wait. He waited because he chose to believe in something bigger than his immediate circumstances. In our world of instant gratification and disposable relationships, Toro's example challenges us to consider what we're willing to wait for, what we're willing to sacrifice for, and what promises we're willing to keep even when keeping them becomes difficult or inconvenient. Think about the people in your life who have shown you loyalty, who have waited for you when you were struggling, who have kept faith in you when you couldn't keep faith in yourself. Think about the promises you've made and whether you've honored them with anything approaching Toro's dedication. Every morning, Toro still walks to that wooden gate. Not because he's waiting anymore, but because it has become his place of purpose, his symbol of the faith that defined his life and inspired the world. Visitors often ask Miguel if Toro understands that he's famous, that his story has touched millions of lives. Miguel always answers the same way. Toro never waited for fame. He waited for love. The fame came because people recognized something in his story that they wish they could find in themselves. The courage to believe that some things are worth waiting for, no matter how long it takes. The gate itself has become a pilgrimage site for people dealing with their own separations, military families, couples separated by work, parents whose children have moved far away. They come to see the place where faith proved stronger than time, where loyalty overcame bureaucracy, where love literally moved mountains of public opinion. The most touching visitor testimonials come from people who credit Toro's example with helping them persevere through their own difficult waiting periods. Cancer patients undergoing long treatments, families waiting for loved ones to recover from accidents, people maintaining hope during economic hardships, all finding inspiration in the story of a dog who proved that faith, properly applied, can achieve the impossible. As I look back on researching and telling you this incredible story, I'm struck by a simple truth. Toro's loyalty wasn't extraordinary because dogs are naturally loyal. It was extraordinary because he made a conscious choice every single day for almost 6 years to honor a promise and maintain faith in the face of uncertainty. How many of us can say we've demonstrated that level of commitment to anything? How many of us have kept faith when circumstances suggested we should give up? How many of us have honored our promises when keeping them became inconvenient or costly? Toro's story isn't just about animal loyalty. It's about the kind of person we choose to be when nobody's watching, when the cost is high, and when the outcome is uncertain. It's about the difference between conditional love that depends on circumstances and unconditional love that transcends them. In a world that often seems dominated by selfishness, betrayal, and broken promises, Toro reminds us that another way is possible. His example proves that loyalty isn't weakness, it's strength. Faith isn't naivety, it's courage. And love, properly understood, isn't just an emotion. It's a decision we make every day about how we'll treat the promises we've made and the people who depend on us. Before you close this video and move on to something else, I want you to think about something. Right now, there's probably someone in your life who's waiting for you, waiting for a phone call, a visit, a text message, or just some sign that you remember they exist. Maybe it's a parent, a friend, a partner, or someone who believed in you when others didn't. Toro waited 2,292 days for Miguel to return. How long has someone been waiting for you to reach out? How long has someone been hoping you'll remember a promise you made or show up for something that matters to them? Here's my challenge for you. Before this day ends, contact someone who's been waiting to hear from you. It doesn't have to be dramatic or complicated. Just let them know you're thinking about them, that you remember they're important, that their faith in you wasn't misplaced. If Toro's story has taught us anything, it's that the world needs more loyalty, more faith, more people who keep their promises even when it's difficult. Be one of those people. Be someone worth waiting for. This is the kind of story that Wind Echo Untold exists to tell. Stories that remind us of the extraordinary capacity for love, loyalty, and perseverance that exists in our world, often in places and beings we least expect to find it. If Toro's story has moved you, if it's made you think differently about loyalty, promises, or the bonds that connect us across species lines, then I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Wind Echo Untold brings you stories like this one every week, true accounts of courage, devotion, and the triumph of love over impossible circumstances. By subscribing, you're joining a community of people who believe that these stories matter. that they have the power to change how we see ourselves and our world. Second, share this story. Toro's example deserves to reach every person who needs to be reminded that faith and loyalty still exist, that promises can still be kept, that love can still overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Share it with someone who's going through a difficult waiting period, someone who's struggling to keep faith, someone who needs to know that loyalty is still possible in our world. Third, tell me in the comments, what's the longest you've ever waited for something or someone important to you? What promises are you committed to keeping, no matter how long it takes? What has Toro's story taught you about your own capacity for loyalty and faith? Your stories matter too. By sharing them, you become part of a global community of people committed to proving that love, loyalty, and faith are still powerful forces in our world. As the sun sets over the Tiger Reserve tonight, Toro will make his final walk to the wooden gate, just as he has every day for over 6 years. But now, instead of waiting alone, he walks with Miguel. The promise kept, the faith rewarded, the loyalty vindicated. Their story proves that some things are worth waiting for, that some promises are worth keeping no matter the cost, and that love, real love, is stronger than time, distance, and human indifference. The gate where Toro waited has become a symbol of hope for people around the world. But the real symbol isn't the gate itself. It's what Toro chose to do there day after day, in weather that challenged survival, in circumstances that would have broken lesser spirits, with faith that never wavered and love that never died. In a world that often seems short on loyalty and long on betrayal, Toro's example stands as proof that another way is possible. His story challenges us to be better humans, to keep our promises, to honor our commitments, and to love with the kind of devotion that can literally move mountains. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through one of the most powerful stories of loyalty ever documented. Thank you for believing that stories like this matter, that they have the power to change us, and that sharing them makes the world a little bit better. Until next time, remember, be someone worth waiting for, keep the promises that matter, and never underestimate the power of love to overcome impossible odds. This has been Wind Echo Untold, and this was the story of Toro, the dog who waited, the faith that triumphed, and the love that changed the world.